Mr. President, I rise today to join with a number of my colleagues. I want to thank the senator from Illinois on her comments as well around pensions. But there's another battle that a lot of us have been down here a number of times over the last couple of years, and that has been about how do we make sure that this country honors its promise and provides a permanent fix for our nation's coal miners, particularly in terms of a promise that was made back in the late 40s by then President Truman in terms of health care retirement, health care for the miners. Last few months has been filled with an awful lot of uncertainty about whether this promise of health care for miners, retirees, their widows, and others would be kept. Matter of fact, earlier this year, 22,000 coal miners or their dependents received notice that their health care benefits would be terminated at the end of April. Well, after months of uncertainty and fighting, we stand ready later this week to pass a bill that would make sure that America kept its promise. We spend a lot of time here on this floor arguing for causes, but rarely in the 8 years that I've been here have I seen any member of the Senate be more engaged, more obsessed, more of a pain in the neck and pain of other parts of bodies on this issue than my great friend, the senior senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin. Truth is, without Joe's tireless work and leadership, I'm not sure the miners in West Virginia or Pennsylvania or other states that were affected would be able to look to this piece of legislation and know that their health care benefits are going to be maintained. Now, this didn't come easily. If nothing else, this shows again the power of persistence. Joe first raised this issue in July of 2015 when he introduced the Miners Protection Act. Since then, he's brought it up, and I would ask my colleagues to contradict me if it's not the case. He's brought it up in every public meeting, private meeting. Whenever there's been more than 2 or 3 senators engaged in any topic, Joe would come bursting in and say, we got to take care of miners. Well, there's a lot of times here in this chamber, those kind of efforts are not recognized or rewarded. I just wanted to be one of the first to say, on behalf of all the miners in Virginia, but more importantly to the 22,000 miners who otherwise would have lost their health care. Many of us played some small role, but we wouldn't be having a permanent fix to the law without the absolute leadership, dedication, and determination of Joe Manchin. And before I turn it over to my colleague from Pennsylvania to make a comment or two, I know at times Senator Manchin, as a former governor, has wondered, can you really get stuff done here? Well, there are a lot of issues that we've still got to work on. There's a lot of things that we haven't gotten done. But for a whole lot of miners, their widows and dependents, without your leadership, America wouldn't kept its promise. Because of your leadership and work, those miners, at least in terms of their health care, can rest easy. With that, I yield the floor to my friend from Pennsylvania.
President.
The senator from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to talk about the same subject that the senior senator from Virginia just spoke of, and that's miners' health care that we're about to complete action on at long last. Long overdue, by the way. This should have been done in December when we were pleading with the majority leader at the time to get it done then. But we're happy that we're at this point now where one promise has been fulfilled, and that's the promise of permanent, guaranteed health care for thousands, tens of thousands of miners across the country. In my home state, last count is 1,955. Let's round it off to 2,000. A lot of families, and we're grateful that we're at this point. I do want to reiterate what Senator Warner said about our colleague from West Virginia, Senator Manchin. He's right. Joe Manchin brought this up at every meeting over the course of many, many months and several years. And we're grateful for the leadership that he demonstrated, grateful that he kept us all focused. I want to thank all of our colleagues who worked on this. I think initially, going back 5 years ago, before Senator Manchin was in the Senate, Senator Rockefeller was raising this issue. This really has been around that long, for at least 5 years. We're hearing this morning from Cecil Roberts, the president of the United Mine Workers of America, who talked about this 5-year fight. So I want to commend and salute Senator Manchin. And also want to thank, in the committee dynamic here, the Finance Committee, several members here on the committee, Senator Wyden, helping us get this bill through the Senate Finance Committee, the Miners Protection Act, and the leadership of Senator Schumer as well, focusing our caucus on getting this done. Just want to make 2 additional points. One is a note of a negative note, but I think it's important to point this out. There was a story yesterday in the publication Think Progress. Here's what the headline was, quote, "Trump administration admits it used miners' health care as a bargaining chip." That was the headline. And then the subheadline was, "Coal miners were just pawns in a larger game," unquote. That's what the headline and subheadline said. I'm not sure I've read a more disturbing headline in a long time, where the health care of coal miners, retired coal miners, who were promised this decades ago, would be used as a pawn in a debate about a spending bill. But unfortunately, at least that's what's been reported. I hope that we don't ever see a headline like that again. And the problem for us now going forward is, as much as we're happy about this current result on health care, is we still have a lot of work to do for miners, especially when it comes to their pensions. That's the second half of the promise. So I'd remind everyone again, these miners kept their promise to their company, to work in the darkness and danger of a coal mine, sometimes for decades, not just years. They kept their promise to their families to support them in the most difficult job imaginable. And many of them have served in combat or served in the military in one war or another. They kept their promise to their country. It's time that we fulfilled the entire promise, and that means getting pensions done as well. But we're grateful to be part of this, and let's keep the momentum going for pensions for all of those retired miners. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The senator from Missouri.
there's a question that Americans should be asking all of us every day. Who are you fighting for? We should be asking ourselves that. Who are we fighting for? And so here's who Joe Manchin was fighting for. Senator Manchin, my colleague from West Virginia, and my other colleagues that are here on the floor. Billy Hull. He's a retired coal miner with 30 years working at the Peabody coal mine near Montrose, Missouri. He wrote me a letter earlier, about 6 months ago, saying in part, "My wife and I, married 59 years, fall under the Patriot Coal Company's Voluntary Employees Beneficial Association. My wife, Earlene, is a 2-time cancer survivor, and I suffered a stroke in 2012. If we lose our health benefits, it will be very hard for us to afford our medicine." So these folks were made a promise by, I am accused of being a fangirl of this guy, and I am a fangirl of Harry Truman. I think he was plain-spoken, I think he was earnest, I think he was honest, and I think he kept people like Billy Hull in the front of his mind 24/7. Good, salt-of-the-earth, hard-working people that play by the rules. Mr. Hull played by the rules. Thousands of coal miners in our states played by the rules, and their widows played by the rules. And the promise made by Harry Truman deserved to be kept. The promise deserved to be kept. So my friend Senator Joe Manchin decided he wasn't going to go with the flow around here. He was going to, I think he said at one point on the floor, I think his quote was, "If you don't stand up for something, we don't stand for anything." And he decided that he was going to get this done. Now, I got to tell you the truth. For about 2 years, everywhere you went, you'd walk behind Joe, and Joe would be trying to talk to somebody about the miners, and after he'd walk off, people would kind of whisper, you know, it's never going to happen. We're never going to get this done. It's not going to happen. Can't tell you how fun it is to celebrate getting something done. We bail out everybody around here. We bail out Wall Street, we bail out banks, we bail out corporations. We're busy figuring out how we can cut the wealthy's taxes as we speak. You know, it's all about making it easier for folks that have plenty. Why is it so hard to help the people who don't have anything? Who depended on a promise just to have the basics in their life and put in the long day's work for years as they're part of that bargain. So I am so proud of Joe Manchin. I can't imagine how proud the coal miners in his state must be of him, for him. I'm glad that we had an opportunity to stand with him as he stood for something. I'm proud that we got it done. And now we've got another big task, because there's another bunch of people out there that are really, we're running roughshod over them, and that's a bunch of truck drivers. Truck drivers in my state that have driven trucks 35, 40, 45 years, understanding at the end of that long period of time they would have a pension. It's not their fault that the pension is not there for them. And I got to tell you, Joe, I got to sign you up. I want Senator Manchin as the captain of the team as we now go on to fight for the pensions that these people earned. If we can bail out everybody we're bailing out, if we can cut taxes by $7 trillion, surely we can find the money to make good on these promises. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. President. I join my colleague, Senator McCaskill from Missouri, in her comments about central state pension. We have a number of workers in our state affected by this as well. But I really stand here today to thank Senator Manchin for his work, to thank our leaders, Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer, as well as Chairman Cochran and Vice Chairman Leahy, for their ability to put partisanship aside and people first and get this deal done. It meant everything from funding for the COPS program to helping with the opioid epidemic, capital investment grants, medical research. But for one guy here, it was all personal, and that's Joe Manchin. He fought long and hard to protect the health care benefits for his coal miners. Think about this. In October, 12,500 retired coal miners and widows receiving notices telling them that their health care benefits would be cut off at the end of the year. Then in November, another 3,600 notices went out. That's over 16,000 people. Now, I don't have coal miners in my state, but you know why I knew about those notices? Because Joe Manchin made sure that I knew about those notices. Because the other senators who've spoken here that have coal miners in those states, they stood up and they made sure we knew about those notices, and they worked tirelessly to get this done. For me, mining is not about that black coal dust, it's about red dust. It's about iron ore. And as Senator Manchin knows, my grandpa worked 1,500 feet underground in the mines in Minnesota. He got his first job as a teamster when he was only in his mid-teens. He had to quit school and go to work and help raise his 9 brothers and sisters. One of them died. His parents died, and he worked underground his whole life. He went down that shaft in that cage every single day just to support his brothers and sisters, and then he married my grandma and support my dad and his brother. And you know what? I wouldn't even be here in the Senate today if he didn't have some benefits that came out of that job that he had and some health care. And Joe Manchin understood that about the people that he represents. Those miners earned those pensions, and they earned their retiree health care benefits. And that's why what he did and what all those senators who represent the coal miners did is more than just about those states and about those miners. It's about a promise we make our workers. As one former Congresswoman, Barbara Jordan from Texas, once said, what Americans want is something simple. They want a country that's as good as its promise. Thank you, Senator Manchin, for fulfilling that promise. I yield the floor.
President,
The senator from Indiana.
thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank my colleague from Minnesota for her wonderful remarks and for her wonderful comments about those people who go down into the mines every day. And I want to acknowledge the permanent health care fix that we have for our miners and their families that was included in the FY17 appropriations legislation. This was a promise made by Harry Truman, and it was a promise that it was our obligation to keep. And the keeper of the flame for making sure that got done was my colleague, Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. As he knows, my state, the state of Indiana, the Hoosier state, has thousands of miners as well. And they go to work in the dark, they come home in the dark, and they work in grueling conditions and have done so for decades. And part of it was the promise that was made to them that they and their family would have health care. A promise made by Harry Truman that it's our obligation to keep. And when the lights were starting to flicker and it was getting dimmer on this promise that it would ever be kept, we fought for years. Joe Manchin led the fight, led the crew, and we got this done. And it's a good example of what Congress can do when we work in a bipartisan manner. And I want to thank all my colleagues on both sides for being part of this. Many people worked hard to secure the passage of this fix. And part of it was an amazing group of folks who came to visit us on a constant basis. Our friends from back home, the miners from Virginia and from West Virginia and from Indiana and from Ohio and from all around this country, who, if you remember, my colleague Joe Manchin was there that hot day this summer when it was 100 degrees outside. And all of these retired miners, many in their 70s, 80s, some in their 90s, were here in the, one of the hottest days of the year under extraordinarily difficult conditions, and they stayed and sat in the sun and in the heat because they said, we're here for our brothers and sisters. And they said, we know you're here for us too. And our leader was Joe Manchin. He lived this every single day, every single conversation that we had. And we were in it together, and we told our miners, we will never stop till we get this done. And we have the permanent health care fix done. And it was a wonderful team to work with. But there's no question that the captain of our team was a fellow from West Virginia. And to my colleague, Joe Manchin, we're so proud of you and so proud of you for keeping us moving forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
The senator from West Virginia.
Mr. President, first of all, I can't express how humbled I am and how proud I am of all of us. And my colleagues here, my dear friend, Senator Warner, we were governors together. We split the Virginias, Virginia and West Virginia, and we worked together. And he has the same constituency base I have in Southwest Virginia, West Virginia, and all of Southwest Virginia and all of West Virginia. But he knows the mining industry. He knows the hardworking people. To Senator Donnelly here, basically from Indiana, and we've been there together, and the coal miners and the people that move the coal and do the hard lifting. Senator McCaskill from Missouri, Senator Casey from Ohio, from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a rich tradition in coal mining. Senator Klobuchar, and everyone who's spoken. Mr. President, I want to thank you too. You were original sponsor. Arkansas. So this is truly a bipartisan. And Mr. President, from Arkansas, you understand what we all, the hardworking people, you signed on the bill without hesitation. I want to thank you. So it was really a team effort. You know, people have been talking about all the things and the passion that we have for different things. My passion comes from the people I was born and raised and grew up with in a coal mining town. So all I ever saw in my life was people around me that nurtured me and guided me and taught me were truly coal miners or coal miner families. That's all I knew. And my Little League coach was coal miner. My Boy Scout leader, coal miner. A lot of my teachers were coal miners, basically, off and on, trying to supplement their incomes. My teammates that I played ball with through high school became coal miners. My grandfather was a coal miner. My uncle was a coal miner who lost his life in a 1968 mine explosion. My next door neighbor, when I'm 1954, I remember I'm 7 years old and I wanted to throw ball all the time, and I'd come home from school and Pinchy would be there and he'd throw ball with me, and I still remember this so vividly, that one day I was ready to play ball and Pinchy didn't come home. And I asked Marcia, his wife, I says, "Marcia, where's Pinchy?" And she says, "Joe, honey, he's going to be a little late today." Well, we just had a mine explosion. I didn't know anything about the mine explosion, but I knew there was no Pinchy to throw ball with. So the second day, I says, "Marcia, where's Pinchy?" Well, they still didn't know the outcome. They didn't know the rescue was going on. They didn't know if they lost their life or not or what had happened. So they were still in limbo. She said, "Joe, Pinchy has to work over again tonight." That was her explanation to me as a little boy. The third day, by that time they knew, and she had to tell me. So she's probably, I know Marcia had to labor with this. How is she going to tell this 7-year-old neighborhood kid who played ball with Pinchy? And she says, it's a tough one. She says, "He's not going to come home." And when you think about the hardworking people that suffered, she never had anything. If it wasn't for her health care, if it wasn't for pension, Marcia would have had nothing. So I know the families and I know their sacrifices. And what you all saw was my passion of the people I grew up with. So when I say thank you, I thank the president for supporting miners, President Trump. I thank my Republican colleagues, and I thank all 48 Democrat senators that never wavered. A lot of them don't have coal mining or don't even know a coal miner. What they know today after 5 years that we've been talking about this and working towards this is that you wouldn't have the country you have today if it hadn't been those people that sacrificed, that worked hard, never asked for a thing, gave everything they could back, took care of their families, but took care of their country. And basically the energy they produced gave us the country. People, whether in California today, wherever they may be, understand that coal miners produced the energy that allowed us to live, to win the World War I, World War II, and every war we've been into, that developed the industrial might, that supported the industrial might that we have, that built the middle class. So I'm so thankful for all that. I get choked up when I think about it because that's what we were fighting for. They never asked for a thing. My grandfather was run out of the mines in 1927 because he was trying to organize and say, we can't make it. If you've ever heard, I owe my soul to the company store, my grandfather owed his soul. He never had any money. He had script. And he said, we've got to do something different. We can't live like this. And they blackballed him. And Christmas Eve, 1927, my grandmother was pregnant with my uncle. She already had 4 children. My dad was the oldest. They come to the house and threw them out of a company house in the middle of a snowstorm on number 8 Hill. And that happened in 1927. So we know it. We lived it. And so in 46, they talked about the history. 1946, the Krug-Lewis Amendment. Krug was Secretary of the Interior, and John L. Lewis was the United Mine Workers, and says, you've got to give these people something. They've got something to live for. They've got no health care. They've got no pension. They've given you everything they've got. And Harry Truman says, we're going to take care of them. You can't go on strike, because if you do, our economy collapses. This is in 1946. So that's how this came about. Now, people says, well, what's a bailout? I've heard this. Well, they're going to bail them out. We're not asking for a bailout. You understand these people basically made an agreement that every ton of coal that was mined from 1946, United Mine Workers, basically, there would be an amount of money set aside that came from every cell of a ton of coal that went into this fund. Every negotiation, contract, union contract negotiation, they contracted and they left money in their contract to pay for their benefits of health care and pensions, and didn't take money home to their family they could have used. They made all these sacrifices for all these years. It wasn't their fault that the bankruptcy laws that were passed in Congress allowed companies to walk away and leave them high and dry. It wasn't their fault. They did everything. So finally, we've all come together to do what the right thing should have been done. And that shouldn't be played politics with today. Everyone says we got winners and losers. We're all a winner. If you can get something like this accomplished and be part of it, then you've got to feel good about it. It gives you a reason to even be here. And that's what I'm so appreciative for. And I'm so proud of everyone that stood together on both sides. My colleague, Shelley Moore Capito, a dear friend of mine, a Republican. I'm a Democrat. But you know what? We're Americans and we're West Virginians. And that's what we were fighting for. And that's the winner today. The winner is this great country that basically stood up and protected the people that gave them everything they needed to be the superpower of the world. That's what we fought for. So there's enough praise and enough accolades for everyone to take home and say, we all did it and we all did a job well done. But we do have pensions now. We cannot, these are not big pensions. These are $300, $400, $500 pensions. And it supplements just a way of life that's not extravagant by any means. So we're going to start working as soon as this is finished this week. And next week we'll start on that. But to the 22,600 miners and their families that say thank you, I've heard from most of them, to all of the people that came up here, they were coming up here, a lot of them, every week and driving just to be here, to be part of it and put a face, put a family, put basically the challenges they would have being able to even exist or live without this health care. They made it possible, and I want to thank all of them. To Cecil Roberts, President of the United Mine Workers, who was so diligent on this, Phil Smith, all of the people that worked so hard, thank them. But really thank all of our senators and the congressmen, my congressional delegation, I'm appreciative of them. Republicans and Democrats on the House side that voted, they're voting now as we speak to send this to us for tomorrow for us to vote and support this. And I know President Trump will sign it. People are saying they used it and played bargaining games with it. I'm not going to get into that because I don't know how you could ever sincerely mean that you were using people's livelihoods and the health care for them and their families as a bargaining chip. I don't think anyone meant to do that. Maybe it came out as something that shouldn't have been said. But with that, we've got to forget all that. And let me just say thank you. To you, Mr. President, to all of my colleagues, thank you. Thank you for a job not only well done, but basically well appreciated that it was done. And people's lives will be different because of what you did. God bless each and every one of you, and thank you.